Good afternoon and welcome to the second session of the second day of the Cassandra Conference. And this afternoon, I'm joined by a number of very high level and interesting experts so that we can look at the advances in the social political awareness of science and technology. And what do we mean by that? Well, what we're looking at today is scientists and technologists and indeed experts from any field and sector very often are working, but with their backs to society in general. And this has been emphasized even more in recent years with the fact that so many people and such a large proportion of the population seems to be gaining its information, and I say information in the very broad meaning of the term, from social media. So we're looking now today at how do we counteract that? How can we make sure that expertise and knowledge from any field or sector can be communicated in a clear and accessible way to the general public, and how once again we can make sure that it is the voice of the expert, it's the voice of the person who has the facts at their fingertips, whose voice is heard, as opposed to people who are just leaning on hearsay and very often downright lies. So I'm joined and I'm delighted to be able to present IRINA CALANCEA. IRINA CALANCEA is the director of Fluent and Green, and she's also the person who is responsible for the third pillar of the Cassandra program, which addresses this very theme of how to train future experts, how to communicate right from the beginning of their academic careers. I'm also joined as well by a colleague of mine from Eurecat, Patricia Castillo, who is responsible for strategy and innovation at Eurecat, which is, of course, the Technology Center of Catalonia. I'm joined also by Klaus Brun Jensen, and I hope I pronounced the name correctly. He's a professor at the University of Copenhagen. I'm joined also by SABRINA KIRSCHKE. SABRINA is the head of public policy research at, and this is where my German is going to be completely laid bare for the general public, the Museum für Naturkunde. Okay, yes, that's okay. Not bad, not bad. We're waiting for Mandy Sangera, OBE, to join us. She hasn't been able to link in at the moment, but we also do have with us, and we're delighted to welcome Shiran Lamdowski-Somek, and she's the founder of Generative AI for Good. So welcome to all of you. Welcome to you, the audience. During the conversation, we will certainly during the last half hour, open up the panel to questions from the general public. You can actually come online and you can actually ask your question to the panel in general or to one specific panelist. But let's get the ball rolling. And I'd like to start off with a question to Klaus Brun, if I may. And the question is the following. Since COVID-19, and COVID-19 was really a threshold moment. It's when we saw very clearly that scientific knowledge was being dominated and in fact was losing the communication war to public hearsay, especially through social media. And since COVID-19, experts, they did gain visibility, but also as a result of the counter arguments from many other uninformed sources, there's also been developed a lot of skepticism towards the view of experts. Klaus, in your opinion, what distinguishes credible public authority from perceived technocracy in today's socio-political climate? And when we talk about today's socio-political climate, we're talking about probably the moment of most crisis with regards to credibility since I started studying politics back in the 70s. So, Klaus, your opinion on that?
Right. Thank you, Richard. Very important question to start us off. I think we're so used in scientific circles to think of documentation. To what extent is the position that we're presenting and the recommendations and conclusions that we pass along depend on documentation. But I think an additional point here is to be transparent about the ways in which this documentation has been produced, the hands it has passed through, And also the question of, so why are we telling people this at this particular point? Why are you telling me this? So the combination of documentation and transparency in terms of that documentation is something that I think public authorities, including scientific scholars, have to offer.
And carrying on with that, to what point do you think that the global audience that exists today, that receives its information largely from this mechanism here, and who seem to demand that their messages be communicated in 100 characters max, to what point do you think that the public are prepared to have the patience or the capacity to understand or to want to hear evidence-based opinion?
Well, I do think that we face challenges when it comes to digital platforms, also when it comes to more classic forms of media. But sometimes we may, in some public debate, actually underestimate the public. So if we are in a position to make the facts available to people, to make the facts actionable, showing how something, for example, in the area of climate change, could actually change people's lives for the better and the lives of their grandchildren. I do think we have an opportunity. It does require further regulation of the sources and the platforms of information, but I remain cautiously optimistic on the potential of communication.
All right, so that is a very optimistic note there, Klaus. Let me bring in Basil, because Basil lives in the United States, and I'm not suggesting anything here to the world audience, but let's be honest, the United States is where an awful lot of the misinformation has found, shall we say, very fertile ground to put its roots in recent years and indeed over the last decade, not just politically, but also socially. Basil, are you optimistic?
I'm always optimistic, but I think we need to take a hard look at also how we're conducting science today. And I think as we talk about science communication, and it's much more than simplifying the science at the end of the process. And I think it needs to really look at engaging stakeholders, decision makers, who we are developing this research for very early on in the process. And I think a better science is a science that is co-framed with those who will utilize it at the end of the day. Is a science that engages the public. It's a science that engages, again, those decision makers. And it's a process that needs to take over the whole, or be a focus throughout the whole process of science development, rather, again, being an afterthought at the end, or merely an exercise of simplifying scientific outputs. So I think we need to be doing more of that, not only evidence-based, but community and stakeholder engaged science in order to address some of these challenges that we're facing today.
Okay, let me throw open this question to the whole panel. And remember, panel, do not be shy. Just raise your hand. You can raise your hand like that, Patricia. That's fine. I can see that. Or otherwise, you can use the hand thing on the Zoom. I
I don't
accept
see
both.
the hand.
I accept both means of communication. Patricia, you wanted to say something.
Yes, actually, I wanted to pick up the mention of transparency that clause and engagement that mentioned Basil, because I really want to make 2 points. The first one is that science and technology are neutral, right? They are always driven by interest, whether they are economic, political, sometimes ideological. So the moment we pretend that they are somehow like pure or virtuous or righteous, and that anyone who questions it is just because it's not proper, he or her is not properly informed, that's when they get really easy to weaponize, right? And then the second point is that they are not only neutral, but they are also not positive by default, right? So therefore, this is not a thing that you solve only with smarter arguments or better communication. This needs to be worked on the ground. And you can imagine a research scientist that spends years trying to solve a specific problem and then go to a community and say, hey, here's the answer. And then the community says, like, the answer to what? Because I have 10 problems. They are all working together at interplay, and I have to juggle and I have to decide whether if I insert this in my system, it will actually solve anything or it just shifts the burden to somewhere else, right? So I think that in line of what Basil was saying, ground level engagement is how you create impact that actually lasts. And I think this is precisely the spirit of Cassandra with the local climate forums, the science embassies, and the communication. And altogether, this builds trust and makes it less vulnerable to ill-fated or bad-fated agents to manipulate or to being distorted.
Okay, Sabrina, you raised your hand very politely, and so did Shiran very politely, and so did Irina. Irina, you can tell, is one of our coordination team, and she knows how to raise her hand, so I can see it. Well done, Irina. But first of all, Sabrina, I saw that yours hand up, then I'll pass to Shiran, and then I'll pass to Irina. Sabrina.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I would actually agree with what has been said before. People are super interested in getting knowledge, and people are also interested in being involved in research and being a little bit more engaged. So not just receiving knowledge, but also being engaged. But as we have to also disagree here a little bit, I also would like to bring the downside of it, and this is the capacity of all these actors involved. And we have the capacity of the researchers. First of all, we know that it is tricky for researchers to do public engagement. It's not incentivized. Probably they don't have enough money for it. Sometimes they don't have the capacity. Sometimes they get attacked. So there are some downsides and hurdles, let's say, for researchers to communicate. And on the other hand, I would also like to stress a little bit this phenomenon of participation fatigue. So it's not that everyone is searching for being involved. So there are certain communities, certain people that are super interested in being involved in being involved in a citizen science project, for instance, or doing a participatory science communication project. But we just discussed this in another forum this week, and sometimes people are it's just too much. So I'm wondering a little bit about the right degree of engagement for everyone so that this is effective.
I mean, I think that one of the problems is that what you're mentioning there about participation fatigue is the establishment of something which I said in the previous session this morning, gives me indigestion every time I hear it, living labs. That is guaranteed to put me in a bad mood, just those two words put together, living labs. And so participation fatigue comes about if many different projects are using the same living labs, or they're going to the same populations. And we'll come back to this a little later, but I saw that Shiran, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, thank you. So I want to add another layer here. It's about the emotion. So of course, it's very important to create that credibility, that transparency, working with the communities, but also while we are working with the affected people, for example, in a very, very sensitive way and even creative way, we can create another layer of emotion, because all the population, we are all overwhelmed with a lot of knowledge and a lot of noises. So if we can create this kind of opportunity of the empathy part and the emotion part, so we can get into their heart and even affect them to a real action and to change behavior and all of that.
Okay, Irina, just before I pass to you, a question again, a general question to everyone. Shiran speaks about something which is very important politically and socially, which is emotion, which is empathy. Yeah. And if there's one thing that certainly seems to be lacking in this day and age, and perhaps, I don't know, perhaps it's always lacked, is empathy. People, first of all, think of number one. They think about their economic position, they think about their social position. Very few people have the capacity to put themselves honestly in the shoes of other people. I'm not saying that there are not a lot of very, very good people on this planet. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that when it really comes to the crunch, how many people are prepared to work altruistically because they understand and they've made an effort to really comprehend the social sector or the group who they claim that they're trying to help. But let me pass the word to Irina. Irina.
Hello, Richard. Hello, all. I think there's a telepathy over there because I was thinking about the same thing. Actually, talking about public engagement, one of the question is how to target your audience. Because engaging with audiences requires specific skills, meaning that always the goal when effectively communicating is to put ourselves in the other people's shoes, right? So this is also our training about, is the course that we're developing within Cassandra, where one of the main steps of this course is the fact that a scientist or an engineer, a scientist, let's say in general, will not speak the same language to someone from a local community, will not speak the same language to someone who works in industry or in politics or in institutional or universities. So the goal here is always to adapt your language in order to communicate effectively to your audience. And this is where we need to be, empathy is necessary. It's necessary to become more human and also to, I would say, to bring closer scientists with publics, because there is still a gap and there is a little bit, we can see a bridge from the scientific world and the public. And if scientists are not able to communicate in an effective way in order to be heard by all the audiences, all type of audiences, so there is this silent science. So if science doesn't speak, someone else will. And someone else is unfortunately very often misinformation, polarization, instrumentalization of information. So this is one of the goal of also Cassandra course that we're developing right now. Thank you.
I mean, I think we should make it clear that we're not discussing here just scientists. What we're discussing here are experts from any field or sector. I mean, scientists can be incredibly antisocial with regards to their work and very reticent to get it beyond the walls of their laboratory. And in fact, the only thing that seems to make them socially happy is if they've received 3 likes for a peer-reviewed article published in some obscure journal that nobody in Central Africa is ever even going to hear of. That's absolutely true. But it's the same for economists, it's the same for lawyers, it's the same for doctors, it's the same for political scientists such as myself, sociologists. For example, yesterday we had expert psychiatrists and experts in gender abuse talking to us. It's the response when we're talking about communication, we're not just picking on one sector, in this case science. No, when we're talking about science, we're talking about expertise with regards to any possible subject. I think that's just important to notice. Klaus, you had your hand raised.
Right, thank you. I just wanted to echo Sharon's point regarding emotion and empathy, and maybe to add another aspect of this. So we're speaking here about ways in which we might be able to engage the public, to offer opportunities for participation and so forth. But we should also ask ourselves, what are the kinds of messages that we have to offer? And since I'm working recently mostly on climate communication and climate change. I just wanted to mention a colleague from the United Kingdom, Tim Lenton, who wrote a fascinating book that came out last year. And in the climate area, we often talk about tipping points. So tipping points are points of no return where disastrous consequences will follow. But the title of his book was Positive Tipping Points. In other words, what kinds of initiatives, whether by local communities or by national administrations, might we think of? So I think in terms of offering hope and positive emotions, we also need to think of messages about solutions, and the solutions
Sure.
are available.
Sure. I totally agree with. I mean, I've been a politician myself. I'm a political scientist, but I've also been a politician. And I always set a rule for myself, which was don't criticize anything unless you've got a solution. Yeah. If you haven't got a solution, shut up. Yeah. So you do need to, you need to identify and describe the problem, but you also need to be able to offer an alternative, to offer something. I think that's very important in communication. Basil, I think, was the next person with his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I'd like to pick on the idea of empathy. I really like that we mentioned empathy, and that's actually one of the key points that I mentioned in an article I recently published on simplexifying sustainability. We live in a very complex world with interconnected social, economic, environmental challenges, with better modeling capability than ever, with more data that we're collecting than ever. Yet at the core of this, we risk not being able to distinguish signal from noise. And it's not, the answer, I think, is not going to be about building the next bigger model or doing the next, using the next bigger data set. But at the core of it, at the core of simplicity, I argue, is empathy. And one example I'd like to give from a project that we've been working on here in San Antonio, Texas, in a city in Texas, where we've worked with local leadership. And I think what made this engagement work was the buy-in of one of the local public officials who was the face of these events for us. So it wasn't me as a researcher inviting all of these cross-sectoral stakeholders to come and spend half a day or a day workshop, but it was the local council city member who invited the representatives across different sectors. So we went through a process of localizing the SDGs in San Antonio, and specifically asking community members and asking different representatives across sectors, what does sustainability mean to you? What does good health mean to you? What does good education mean to you? What does water security mean to you? Energy security, climate action as a city? And what are the key targets that you have that represent where you want to be as a city as we move forward? And what metrics do we want to use to measure that progress moving forward in an effort to basically create a sustainability dashboard that looks like the city, that represents the city, that is owned by the city and has the buy-in of all of these members and sectors who helped co-create it. So I think we need more of that kind of on-ground engagement. I agree that not everyone will participate in every engagement event, but at least making sure that we have the mechanism, the platform, and that it's done in an intentional way with sufficient resources and sufficient talent that's allowing that dialogue to happen, rather than saying it's hard. Yes, it is hard to do, and it takes a lot of time investment, and it takes a lot of trust building, and it takes a lot of resources. But it's very necessary for successful research, I think.
But nevertheless, what you've said is very important. The example that you've given there is very important, that you were talking to a local official. Now, I was for a time, 15 years ago, I was the deputy mayor of a city here in Spain, and for a very short time, I was the mayor of this city. And I would receive a lot of visits from research centers or from experts on various fields saying, what you need is this, this, and this. And I said to them, before you started your studies, before you began your work, why didn't you come and ask me, people such as myself, what we needed or what our citizens were facing, what were the problems our citizens were facing? Because then your research would be far more relevant to what we would look to, what we need, rather than us having to try and adapt to something that you yourself already thought of. So I think that what you mentioned there is absolutely vital. Let me pass it on to Irina.
Yes, also adding to what Basil just said, I would like to add also a few successful initiatives of engagement between scientists and the public audience. Actually, I have two different examples. One is more formal one, is the example of France. In France, concerning sustainability, there is this initiative called la Convention Citoyenne pour le Climat. This is the Citizens Convention for Climate. What did the government do? So basically, there were 150 people that were randomly selected and who worked with economists, who worked with legal experts, with scientists. So the task of this convention was to propose climate policies to decrease by 40% the greenhouse house emissions. So this is a successful example in France where collective intelligence really worked between scientists, and not only between the scientists and the public audience, because the goal here was to rebuild trust. And there were 150 different proposals that were made, and 80% of them were adopted by the government. So actually is maybe an initiative that also we can also think to replicate in other countries, because all around the world there are many initiatives that works. And because we tend to speak with negative lens, no, because it creates more reaction, because it creates more, I mean, for algorithms in digital media is perfect, talking about bad news and not the good news. But let's remind that there are many initiatives like this one. And another example that I would like to share with you is very interesting. It's called Pins of Science. What does it mean? It means that there is this initiative, is a festival all around the world once per year in May. So you can look at, you can check it out. So basically what happens is that there are bars where just scientists will meet random people. And this is a way, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny, but it's true.
The reason why I'm laughing, because I have this image of scientists being let out once a year from their laboratories and go, out you go, now go and have a drink with the masses, but be back before 8 o'clock in the evening.
Exactly. So, but you know, it's a way to really build trust in science, and not because I think that for public audience, for public in general, science sometimes, very often, it's felt like something a little bit far from our reality, from our daily lives. But this is a nice way to approach and to bring closer people from different environments. And it's an initiative that really works. So let's think also of the good things that exist and maybe replicate them.
I mean, we know each other well, so I can criticize you. I'm not criticizing you, but it's like, aren't we making the mistake by acts like that? We're saying, no, scientists are a different breed, but they're actually going to deign to mix with the masses for a couple of hours one evening in May. Isn't that a mistake? I mean, surely we need to get to a point where no matter what is somebody's expertise, it doesn't matter whether they're a baker, whether they're an expert postman, if they're an accountant, if they're a lawyer, no matter what they do, they're also part of society. Yeah. Why do we separate? It's like when you go to the doctors, somebody puts on a white coat and has a stethoscope around their neck, and immediately they become God. Yeah, when they're not. They're just other human beings. And in fact, some of the doctors I know, I wouldn't follow their advice if you paid me. But it's like, why is it that we as a society, in fact, the question is it we as a society that sort of like go, oh no, that's a scientist, distance yourself, or is it mutual, the distancing? Yeah, I find this really interesting. Patrizia is nodding her head, which is a very good way of gaining my attention and therefore getting the voice. So Patrizia, over to you.
Thank you, Richard. I was actually waiting to say something related to another thing, but this just kind of take my attention. You know, I find that this is what I meant really in my first intervention about, you know, kind of idolizing or creating this aura of specialness around science and technology, right? So, but what I mean to say is that sometimes we tend to be reductionist, thinking that when we are supposed to communicate science or to build trust with scientists, this is a matter of language, simplifying language or simplifying concepts, which is the case in many cases. But the difference is really, it's a mental framework, right? Again, is you have a person that dedicates tunnel vision to solve a problem, whatever it is. It might be a scientific technical problem, it might be a social science problem, and you are tunnel vision into that. Whereas a community is juggling different kind of things. And a very interesting example that it's currently unfolding is the issue of the data centers. Right? You have the advocacy groups, the climate change groups, everyone putting evidence on the table saying, look, this is a problem. This is going to be an environmental problem. This is going to put strain on the resources. This is going to create whatever, etc. All well documented and with evidence base. And on the other hand, you have the big techs saying, look, this is going to create jobs and this is going to bring prosperity. You have been enduring years of, you know, the economic decline, and this is going to bring it back. And the tricky part is that they have evidence as well. So it's never, ever a bipolar issue of good versus bad or evil versus, it's a very layered process that includes emotion, that it includes survival, that how met are the needs of certain communities that they are even considering, you know, assuming risks for short-term gains. So it's all about trade-offs. And I think, speaking of empathy and emotion, we need to factor that in. It's not yeah.
No, I mean, we could end up this session by actually starting a program where you say, adopt a scientist because they need loving. I can see us going in that direction there. Sabrina, you had your hand up, then I'll pass to Shiran and then to Basil. Sabrina.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up this whole question about complexity and that we are dealing with complex problems, and therefore we need a certain way of communicating or engagement. I would completely agree that the problems that Cassandra deals with are... Oh, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I thought I had an internet connection issue. So I completely agree that the problems that Cassandra deals with are very complex, and I would even argue that they are pretty wicked in the sense that there are a lot of conflicts, value conflicts. So we for sure have complexity, but dynamic, complex systems, side effects, and we even have a lot of uncertainty. And the question is, which role can researchers or experts, more generally speaking, have in these wicked problems? And I think society, but also sometimes the scientists themselves, they expect somehow to solve a problem. Listen to the science, right? So there is a certain issue, climate change, and then comes the scientist and he tells you what to do. But is this the role of a scientist or of an expert in a wicked problem setting? I would clearly say no. So there are different functions. Maybe we can help as researchers to define a problem, to sense a problem, or we can be an honest broker, bring different people together, open up for the solution landscape. So there are various roles that researchers can have in these wicked problem contexts. And I think this also means that we have to apply very different methodologies. So sometimes it may be cool to have this type of event. You go to a festival and you communicate your science. But in other cases, with a different, where you have a different function, you may also use a different approach. So I would argue for a very differentiated perspective on this discussion, not just say one thing is better than the other.
Okay, I'd just like to take this opportunity to welcome Mandy Sangera. We're delighted to have you with us. Welcome.
Bless you, sorry, I don't know what has happened. I got blocked out. It wouldn't let me back
Do
in.
not
I don't know.
worry. It
Oh,
happens
bless
to
you.
me
Thank
all
you.
the time. It happens
Oh,
to
my.
me all the time. If there's a technical glitch that can happen, believe me, it happens to me. Do
Oh, I
not
know.
worry.
I'm
You're very, very welcome to join us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I will be asking you questions a little later on, Mandy, because you are an expert in getting specific messages across, especially with regards to women. But I will be coming back to you very, very shortly. Let me just pass the word, first of all, to Shiran, who had her hand up.
Yes, thank you. So I want to share a reference from a different domain, but a very sensitive one, about domestic violence. And in that domain, we have to deal.
The timing is perfect with Mandy, who's just arrived. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. It's all related, you know. So we want to educate the public about the warning sign of domestic violence. And we handle two challenges. One, that people are avoid those kind of contents, right? Talking about violence and specifically domestic violence. And also the messages are very complex, as many of the signs of domestic violence are invisible. And so what we did, it was around like 5 years ago, before the hype of the ChatGPT and the Gen AI and all of that. And we came with an idea using the new AI technology that came into our lives. And I came with a very unique, if you can say that way, unique idea that to bring virtually back to life women that has been murdered, like animate their still image. So in that way, those women that have been murdered can tell their stories to the people and increase awareness and share what they experienced before the murder. And with this insane in mind, it probably was the first ever social campaign using AI. We brought virtually back to life 5 diverse women from different sectors. And this campaign became a tremendous success. We had like 10 million views in 3 days, and almost half of the viewers were men. That is what we consider to be one of the main achievements, because we succeed to get out of our echo chambers, right? To engage men, like new audience. And we presented in a different international platform as well, but above all, we increase awareness to domestic violence. So and also, as you can imagine, this was very, very sensitive and complex project. And we can see the methodology we use. We work closely with the affected families that lost their loved ones. We work with leading human rights and domain expert about domestic violence. And everything was transparent. We had a consent. We use it in a very transparent way. And this is why we succeed to get more traction. And what we found out, it's kind of the dual AI bridge, because one, we succeed with make those invisible signs more visible, but also we got more attraction, more engagement from the public, because they understand that the face that they are seeing is not the real person that's sharing the story. So in that way, the AI technology become of a mediator and make this very sensitive content more accessible to the audience, including curiosity and all of that. So this was very, very interesting case studies, and since those 5 years, we learned a lot along the way, and we're active in the different domains of human trafficking, conflict zone, and many others.
That's a fascinating approach. I must admit that when you said it, the first thing you said that you recreated, my first reaction internally was like, what?
Exactly.
Because, I mean, my first thought was, well, obviously they worked with that person's loved ones, their family and everything, because it must have been a very, very delicate operation. But nevertheless, if it's successful, incredibly important. So I think that that's actually a perfect moment to bringing in Mandy Sanghera, who is who's been awarded the OBE for her work with regards to international human rights, and we're delighted to have her with us. Mandy, I'd be interested to actually hear your reaction first of all with regards to what Shiran has just described.
I've actually been lucky enough to see her product actually, so I feel like I got a bit of an advantage. So, which is fantastic. But actually, I guess, you know, for me, for like families and survivors to watch that, it was absolutely phenomenal. And actually, I've used tech for good for around the world and done hackathons in over 144 countries now to date, mostly in person, but in some places we've done them online. And for me, like get so shocked every time I see something new. I just get so excited. I'm like a kid in a candy shop. And actually, and when I saw Shirin's product, I think I was in New York and I saw it on the screen and she was presenting it, and I was like, gosh, I can see this, and how powerful it was and how it really brought the lived experience to life for people to really see the story. So I think for me, like, I've seen this, but I've also seen the dark side of AI and technology in violence against women, especially I'm working with the UK government around tackling deep fakes, looking at online violence. So usually we use the statistics of 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 women has experienced violence in their lifetime, but now we've changed that to 1 in 2, and because we're now taking online abuse just as serious, to be honest with you.
Sure. So you're telling me now that at present, is that in the UK, Mandy, or is that?
I think globally, because actually, do you know what? Last year, towards the end of the year, UN Women also did a great big campaign around 16 days of activism, and they looked at, you know, online abuse. And then what happened was around the world, and I mean, I travel all over the world and work with women, but actually women's voices are being silenced with online stalking, being harassed with the deep fakes. And in some communities, the code of honor and shame is just so prominent that women voices are being excluded from society. A lot of women will not come to those spaces to have those kind of conversations. So for me, I've been lobbying not just the UK government, but the tech giants, and saying to them, where do we stand on that? I mean, I went to Dubai about 3 years ago, and I did a conference just after the pandemic around sexual abuse of children. And I think people were like, oh my God, you've gone to the Middle East to have this conversation. But actually, I wanted to talk about online safety and saying to parents, you know, you give your children all this technology, you don't know what your children are doing, you don't know who they're talking to. And they really brought into that, and the police got involved with me to look at how do we safeguard young people, not just in the Middle East, in Dubai, but now I've done it in Saudi and other places as well. So it's really important that when we're looking at violence, that it's a whole system approach, that we're personal responsibility, parents have a responsibility, and it's not just to the governments and the tech giants to be looking after and keeping people safe. We need to keep ourselves safe online as well.
I mean, Cassandra, since its inception in 2021, one of the 4 pillars of our work is gender inequality. And that has led also to the question of abuse. And for example, there's a report which I'm now concluding and that will be published, I hope, within the next month or so, where we're looking at the question of sexploitation. For example, there are many countries, including European countries, where women are forced to have sex in exchange for access to clean drinking water or in exchange to food. It's that simple, and it's that disgusting. And this is something that first came to light when I was working in Nairobi, and I saw the physical evidence of what was happening there. And I was very disappointed by the reaction of UN Women, funnily enough, for whom I actually wrote in a report on what I'd seen in certain ghettos of Nairobi. And they said, well, that we're not interested in that. That's a question for UNICEF. And I said, no, we're talking about women here. But anyway, that's by the by. What I am fascinated in as well is what you're saying, that I can see very much the benefits. I mean, what Shiran has has described, I find incredible. I find it must have been a very delicate operation to bring ahead, but quite incredible at the same time. And I can imagine the effect that is. Now then, and I open this up to everybody. Okay, we all know that, for example, AI, and I know that Klaus is an expert. I thought, well, all of you are experts to some degree or other with regards to communication, and therefore AI forms a very important point of that. Now then, we know that AI, and you mentioned yourself, for example, the abuse of AI. I mean, for example, there have been many cases which have been coming out recently in the press about women's faces being transposed onto basically pornographic scenes, not just women, I presume men as well, but this is becoming a phenomenon. And AI is getting to the point where sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish reality from falsehood. Now then, as people who are trying to get messages across about the social and political consequences of climate change, migration, human health, gender inequality, abuse of women, and also armed conflict. We've been talking a lot about the problems. All right, what are the solutions? We face Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, and I quoted him yesterday as well. He made what, in my opinion, was the most important speech in the last decade. He made an era-defining speech when he told, basically, the message was aimed, I think, more than anything at Europe, at Davos, when he said, look, we have got to stop thinking about the world we want to live in and start thinking about the world we actually do live in and face up to reality. So I'm now going to ask you as a panel, let's face up to reality. We understand that there are excellent things about AI. Shiran has just given a fantastic example. But we also know that, unfortunately, human nature being what it is, not everybody, but a large percentage of the population also use it, AI and all the technological advances, for, shall we say, obscene or frankly disgusting reasons, be they sexual, be they political, be they social, no matter what they are. All right, how do we break that? How do we get the right messages across? How do we compete with what I like to describe as the mass use of social media in a negative way? Because that's the situation we're facing. It's Donald Trump is in power, in his own words, thanks to TikTok. And that's not a joke. Unfortunately, that's not a joke. Yeah. And most of Donald Trump's voters, and I'm picking on Donald Trump, but I could be picking also on the voters for Nigel Farage in Britain, or the voters of Vox in Spain, or the voters of Front National in France, etc., and an enormous, etc. Okay, how do we counteract that? How do we get the scientific facts across at a time when climate change, thanks to the geopolitical situation in Ukraine, in Gaza, in the Sudan, between the Russians and the Americans who have just refused to re-sign a nuclear agreement, how do we, in this current situation of uncertainty, get the message across about what concerns us? How do we do that in a successful way? I open it up to the panel. You have 5 minutes to give me the solution to solve the world's problems.
If only. Oh, okay, I've got my mics on, so I think okay. For me, like, I guess, you know what, there's a lot of campaigns that have come and gone, and for me, it's not about just jumping onto the newest fad that's coming in, whether it's Black Lives Matters or the Me Too movement or whatever. So I guess for me, one of the things that I say to young people is that actually find a cause or something that you're interested in. So for me, violence against women, refugees' rights are the kind of driving forces. So whenever I'm in the World Economic Forum, the UN, the European Parliament, or wherever, even Congress, I use those platforms to talk about those issues. And for me, as you've just mentioned, there's an awful lot of things that are not great in the world, but actually, how can we all come together? How can we unite and look at really addressing some of those issues? And when you're coming together. I always look at it as a piece of a jigsaw puzzle, and everyone has a piece to bring into that. And sometimes we're missing pieces, and those pieces are so obvious. So, for instance, say we're talking about safeguarding, but actually it might be the person that is on the ground who really knows everything and has got the intel. It's about valuing and respecting people and not being so elitist. And I know that I've worked with many organizations and sometimes don't want to hear from people who are really the experts on the ground. So for me, it's about looking at using social media and AI for good, and looking at campaigns. And I'll just give you one example and then I'm going to stop. So in Uganda, we worked with trying to educate young people after the pandemic. There was a lot of people, and even in the UK, we were in the same storm, very different votes. The UK, one of the richest countries on the planet, but we had young people that didn't have access to the internet or have laptops.
Sure.
So it really showed you the ones who had and who did not have anything. So it really did bring that to the surface. So with Stanford University and Austin University in America, we created a Raspberry Pi that works with the solar power, and actually we're able to kind of charge 7 little tablets for young people and take those classrooms and like teachers to those young people in the rural communities. And so for me, it's really important about looking at the problem, and whether it's in a hackathon, how do we find those solutions? And sometimes it's listening to the young people or the real people who know what the problem is, and they just want a chance or they just need the resources.
Sabrina, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I think this is such a big and important question. I was wondering about the mass of misinformation that we get and how we can really react to that. And one reaction could be to provide a mass of good information and to correct this bad information that we find on the web. I don't know if there are science bots or whatsoever that can do it, because it's not possible that an individual scientist goes on X or on whatever social media platform and corrects all misinformation that is out there. The other thing is, I think we need more dialogue, and I think this was mentioned before already a couple of times. When we think about expert information or science information, we often have this deficit model of science communication in mind. So we think that the others do not know so well what they are doing, so I educate them, I transfer information, I write a policy brief, I have a talk and so forth, and I teach the others, so to speak. But I think what we really need is to get in touch again, so to really meet. I really love to meet you online. This is really great because we could not have traveled all to the same place probably. But it's also important to just see each other and really talk to each other, and first of all listen to what kind of problems and concerns and questions people have, and then just come into a conversation, because I think this can build trust. And this can be more powerful, but maybe this is naive, but I think this can be more powerful than just reading something on social media. But the experts will know what counts more, but I think this could be a way forward.
Klaus, you had your hand raised.
Right.
Well, I see that everybody's got their hands raised, which is great. Klaus.
Thank you. Yes, one question that I've increasingly asked myself recently is, what are the ways in which, in practice, researchers are able to reach out and collaborate with communities? And it seems to me that very often researchers are so concerned about getting the next grant or getting the next grant publication out and so forth. So increasingly, when I talk to colleagues around the world, I try to make the point that next time we would like to hire a postdoc or a research assistant, we should perhaps instead hire a communications person or an administrative person who would be in a position to do that connecting work, because
Sure.
let's face it, we some of us perhaps are okay as communicators, but others are better than us. So we need more what you could think of as front offices, where this interaction is facilitated and also made more professional, so that we can take care of the evidence, make it transparent, and use the front offices for this purpose.
Basil.
I wanted to build on Klaus's comment and maybe on the type of communication we've been focusing on in this discussion between researchers and communities or the public. And I think there's also another dimension of communication that we need to be thinking about, especially when we're talking about such complex, interconnected challenges, when we're talking about climate change, migration, water security, energy security. I think there's also an important need for communication between scientists among themselves, because there's no one economist or no one engineer or no one political scientist is going to be able to address all of this complexity on their own. So unless we also invest in the time and effort needed to understand each other's languages, and as Mandy mentioned, take a systems approach to these challenges, we're not going to be able to make a dent and to be effective. And I'd like to also mention a study that we just finished with the Microsoft AI Economy Institute, where we did an analysis of the job market. Basically, we took 1.3 million jobs off LinkedIn, job descriptions, and wanted to look at what are some of the key skills that we see across the job market, but also across some of the more technical jobs that do require some level of AI literacy. Surprise, surprise, the number one skill was communication across the whole job market. But then even in the most technical jobs that did require a high level of AI literacy, among the top 10, without any consistently across different sectors, we saw teamwork, leadership, collaboration, communication were among the top 10 skills. So this is also becomes a question for higher education and its role in building and evaluating those skills in the curricula that we're developing today, and not just assuming that these things happen on their own. So I think
Which gives me a wonderful excuse to open up the floor to IRINA, first of all, and then Patricia, because between them, they are responsible for, we work on 3 pillars. We work promoting the importance of the local community on the ground. We work with the importance of science embassies, who are, as you know, Basil, voluntary scientists or experts or entities who are prepared to go online to answer an emergency problem from one of our local communities. And then at the same time, the 3rd pillar, which has attracted perhaps more attention than any other pillar, and is certainly a vital part of our work, is to try and answer the question, how can we, from the moment that an expert, no matter what their field, begins to learn their expertise, right from the early age, how can we establish that they, right from the beginning, are trained also to communicate whatever they're going to learn, and the importance of doing that. Let me pass over to IRINA with regards to that, and if you want to explain that a bit more, IRINA.
Yes, sure. I think one of the things that we are developing right now is the raising awareness of the fact that we're talking about scientists, but as you, Richard, mentioned, it could be engineers, can be different careers. So their role, their sociopolitical role, each of them have in the society. And in order to understand that, one of the first questions, one in the curriculum that we developed, one of the first questions is why communicating? So why? What is the reason why me as a scientist, have to communicate? So this is the first step. And then the second step will be the what. What will be the right content to communicate to the audience? After that, we are talking about audience. So who is the audience? Who is the target audience? How can we develop the right empathy in order to put ourselves in our audience shoes? We also learning about what are the main challenges, what are the main issues that a scientist could face when communicating. And of course, at the end, the goal is to have different examples of successful communication, because this successful communication is something that we can inspire of. And at the end, of course, the question is how to apply all this learning into your practical life. So we are pushing with the fact that these courses is very important from the beginning of the academic career, because in this way, from the beginning, we can start developing our critical sense. And in this way, it's also a good way to become more better decision makers in the future, and also to, of course, better communicate in the future. I can give an example of Finland. I don't know, Finland is one of the first countries in Europe where all the students, basically they are doing what we are working on, Richard. So right from the beginning, all the students in Finland, they are taught how to effectively communicate. And Finland is ranked first country in Europe as they are successful. So all the students and all the scientists, and of course, especially the public audience, they know how to detect misinformation. Why? Because they start right from the beginning, be trained about how to effectively communicate, but also how to detect what is the real information, what is the real fact from opinions. And this is a good example because they also have this cross-sector approach. Right from the beginning, all the students, they already work and collaborate with universities, of course, but also with industrials, with public audience, with institutions. So actually, it's a successful example in country, that a model that we have in Europe. And my question will be like, why not replicating it? Of course, it's not as easy. But if it's a model that works, we may think to replicate it also in other countries. Thanks.
Which, before I come to first of all Shiran and then Patricia, I would ask, and I will return to ask this question immediately afterwards, after we've heard from Shiran and Patricia. Is it a question of politicians not wanting people to be able to communicate? Yeah, I mean, there's an awful lot of political forces that the last thing that you want is for the general public to be able to be informed properly, okay? Because that could be very uncomfortable depending on whatever that political position or whatever that issue may be. Shiran, first of all.
Thank you. So for your question, yes, I think there are many different, incentive and agendas, but also I want to reflect the other question as well. And Klaus mentioned when he was talking about the challenges. So I think I'm a great believer on cross-sector collaboration, bringing in the researchers, the academia, the relevant organizations, survivor, the public sector, policymaker, and all of that. And I can share that we took our approach one step forward, and now we are working with live survivors. And some of them are dealing with shame, stigma, fear, so they don't want to share their experience, their testimonies with the public. However, it's very, very important, especially when we're talking about policies, reports, all those dry numbers and facts, and we really need to see the face. But in many cases, those people cannot reveal their faces, right? So we are working together with those brave survivors that want to speak up, but afraid about their lives. And many, in the civilians world, it's one thing, but in more conservative and small community, in some cases, they also have a fear about their life, their families, and so on. So we develop a platform when we're working with a survivor, get their testimony, and create their dedicated AI avatar, so they can speak up, still create this empathy, because the public can see, like, I want to say a real face, kind of a real face, AI-based, but still a face, so they can create some, feel like emotion and empathy to the story. And we also give them a platform where they can share this testimony with a wide audience. And we did it in the domain of human trafficking, but also conflict. And we successfully launched our project called Hearing Their Voices in the UN in Geneva last December. And
I'm sorry, can you
repeat
the name again? Sorry.
Hearing Their Voices, Hearing Their Voices. Yes, I can share also in the link later on the project. We launched it in the UN, and we brought 12 speakers, some of them faith leaders, other survivors, other from the other diplomats, all together to discuss this very, very, very sensitive topic. And we saw immediate impact, how we create some influence in Syria, for example. We change the narrative from a victim to a symbol of resilience, and we got more women. They got courage to share their testimonies as well. And this is how we create this kind of impact. The cross-sector collaborations, using the AI in a very, very sensitive, very professional way, together with the survivor and the relevant organization.
I mean, I think that when you do hear the testimony of survivors of any sort of injustice, be it sexual abuse, be it gender inequality, be it hunger, be it drought, or be it as a result of armed conflicts, the testimony is always going to be the most powerful. And the way that you're doing it in a way that at the same time, shall we say, helps the victim to be able to express themselves freely, but at the same time to feel that necessity of protection, I guess, is a way of describing it. I think it's very, very important and extremely impressive. Patricia, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Richard. I wanted, apologies, I want to bring back the conversation,
No, sure.
or at least my to the issue of this disinformation and misinformation and the ecosystem that we are kind of living now, right? And the importance of policy and policy actors. So when you asked how do we solve this issue? So my mind immediately went to a couple of things. First, the European Union has put together several code of conducts under the Digital Service Act, but these are still voluntary, right? The platforms, the big platforms adhere to this, but there's no way of enforcing several rules. So this, and at the same time, the platforms provide patchy reports that are not consistent and that do not have enough data, research data, to really, come up with the actors that are observatories of disinformation to provide a solid policy recommendation. But on the other hand, I think we cannot leave off the hook the users of the platforms, right? In the sense that there's a lot of people, influencers, content creators, and we ourselves, the casual users, that are knowingly or not fueling disinformation narratives. And when we speak of training researchers into communication, I think this is an afterthought. I mean, this is a post thing. I am strong, and I'm going to go full circle, because I started my research career on media education before the advent of the social media. I think media literacy is, from the beginning, from primary school, is a key skill that everyone needs to be taught and should be in curricula. And at the same time, I'm watching with worry that all these STEM hype, all this promotion of STEM capabilities and skills are coming at the expense of humanities, in the sense that we are losing in the primary education and secondary education, philosophy, sociology, all these kind of knowledge that kind of makes you put these things in the right places and have a proper own and solid criteria to ponder what is happening in the world. So I think this would be the keys: enforcement and prohibition of things that are harming evidently harming, media literacy in schools, and balancing again and bringing back some of these signatures and some of these classes that help build a civic understanding and a good for all kind of understanding for people.
I mean, I'm now going to be a grandpa, but when I was a child, we didn't have internet. Yeah, we didn't have mobile phones. And, I have nephews from my ex-wife, through my ex-wife. And they used to ask me, how did you ever meet a girl? I said, it was impossible without AI. And I went, well, funnily enough, we saw these people face to face and we introduced ourselves to each other. And then we had something called a conversation, and we didn't have to write a thing. And they look at me as if I'm off on another planet. But, that's the sad thing, which is one of the reasons why. And I would just like to ask this across the panel, because it just occurred to me now while Patricia was talking, that the British government are the latest government, and correct me if you're wrong, Matt, if I'm wrong, Maddie, because I mean I read The Guardian. I haven't been back to England for years, but I do read The Guardian. That they have now proposed that all under 16-year-olds be banned from social media.
Yeah,
that they're not allowed to use it. Full stop. What is the?
I mean, they're looking at managing that. Yeah,
what
I think
I mean
that is
something.
That? Yeah, so we're looking at proposing that. But one of the things that I wanted to just talk about, and listening to what we're saying, about 7-8 years ago, there was a big meeting at the UN. We brought everybody together, and they were looking at the Universal Human Right 30 laws. And then they realized that actually technology and all those things have not been included. And actually, we need to have a couple of new things to be added, to be adapted according to AI and tech. But that hasn't happened. So, it's great having these conversations at all these tables, but actually we're not implementing those. And when I'm talking about like digital literacy, there's a lot of people that are not literate on the laptop. Some people can't even read and write in their own language. So, and there is a lot of people, around the world that don't have access. So they've been totally excluded. But for me, for young people and all those other people, they get an app, they just want to download it. They give away their data, they give away their information without realizing the consequences of what they're signing away, because they're just so obsessed with wanting to download the new tech. And then about the myths and disinformation, sadly, it is out there. And I mean, I'm not going to credit Trump here, but actually he did make fake news a real thing. And actually, I think now there is so much out there with deep fakes, a lot of information that you have to question. And sometimes I'm like looking at it thinking, oh my God, did that really happen? Especially when there's wars and conflicts going around the world, and actually that information is out there. And sometimes you have to like double, triple check yourself. And actually, before you share it, would you really want to do it? Because you would fact check that. If we were having this conversation, we would do that. But online, people sometimes become not irresponsible, but just don't think about the consequences of their actions. And I think there is a lot of work, and there needs to be a new Bill of Rights around technology, because actually there's people like me and you that grew up, we had a QWERTY keyboard. So, things were very different when I was at school as well, Richard. So I'm just saying. So, and
I didn't even have a calculator, which is why the reason I say that I am actually not a doctor is the fact that nobody gave me a calculator. And so therefore I could never get through the maths exam. So in order to become a doctor, and so I ended up being a political scientist. I blame the lack of technology at that time for that situation. I mean, for example, you talk about that. I was getting numerous phone calls last week, or the beginning of last week, I think it was, from people, because, people know that I'm a political scientist, and they went, is this true? And I read it and I went, no, of course it's not true. This is a hoax. And it was Trump's letter to the Norwegian Prime Minister. And it was true. Yeah. So we come to the point now where it's like, I mean, I'm a political scientist. That's my job. And I was looking at thinking, well, that can't be true. Yeah. And actually it was. But we're already so accustomed to the fact that hoaxes are appearing every 5 minutes that sometimes it's very difficult to discern what is the truth or not. Just want to open up to the audience. If anybody in the audience wishes to ask the panel a question, we've got 15 minutes left in this session. If anybody wants to ask a question, you can put up your hand and I can see to the screen on my right anybody who has their hand raised. But in the meantime, to kind of round off, and this conversation really we needed to have 5 hours, but if we had had 5 hours, Basil would have died of hunger for not even having had time to have breakfast. Klaus would have killed me because he would have missed probably a number of his classes at the university, and Patricia would have told me off. So I can't extend it to 5 hours, even though I would love to, because there's so much that we can discuss within this. Going back right to the beginning of the conversation, to everybody, and open this up to the whole panel, whilst I haven't received any questions from outside. What are you optimistic? Bottom line, do you believe that in 10 years' time, I know it's a simplistic question, I'm a simplistic person, what can I say? In 10 years' time, do you think that we have the capacity to overcome what we describe in Cassandra as the silence of science? Are we capable, through, for example, education of the very young, as Mandy, for example, mentioned, the system that IRINA and Patricia are creating for Cassandra itself? Do you think, I mean, Klaus right at the beginning said, I'm optimistic, or I don't know if it was Klaus or it was Basil or both of them, but they both were happy and cheery, and I hope I've depressed them a little bit during the course of this last hour and a quarter. But my question is, do you think that we are capable as a society to, using AI, using all of the technology which is at our disposition, to counteract, basically, let's be honest, the populism which dominates the social and political life of most of the world at this moment? Sabrina, you had your hand up very quick there.
Oh no, hopefully not too quick. Because I don't have an answer to that, but
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to share. I'm optimistic, and I'm optimistic because we had a nice conference 2 years ago on perspectives on science communication at the Natural History Museum in Berlin, and we had a lot of research entities there, politicians, people from civil society as well, and we discussed a lot what can be done to overcome the silence of science, and we saw all the problems, the barriers, the hurdles. I also mentioned some of them, but we also found a number of solutions on how to overcome. And in the end, we also realized that it's very important that everyone has to act. So it's not just an academic or research entity that has to do something, but also politicians and the funding agencies, civil society, or the public itself has to act through also asking for scientific knowledge. So if we all work together, I think we can do something. But it's not that, because we easily blame someone else. So the academia says, well, I don't have enough funding. So it's a politician who has to provide more funding, and then a politician comes and says, well, but you have to do more and have to be more engaged. So we all have to take a look at ourselves and act. So this would be my answer to that. And if we manage that, I think we can manage that as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Sabrina. Klaus.
Yes, I wanted to mention that I stay moderately optimistic. I think that was the formulation from the outset.
You've toned it down since we began this conversation, Klaus.
But one reason, in addition to events such as this and the Cassandra outfit, is that I think we do have a strong set of new social movements, civil society in a different position. I mean, if we were to, in the darkest hour, compare populism today to populism of the 1930s, I think we do have the sort of civil society infrastructure in a good number of cases collaborating also with good forces within science and scholarship. So with that third force alongside a state and market, I will stay moderately optimistic.
And it is true that, for example, social media also means that within minutes we are aware of what happens, for example, in Minnesota, to give you a very recent example, something like that. I mean, within minutes, within seconds, when something's happening in Gaza, we know immediately. So, I mean, there is the other side of the coin that we are able to receive bad true news as much as we are able to receive false news. And perhaps, as many of you have been saying, what we really need to do is to be able to educate people right from the word go, to be able to discriminate between what is true and what is not true. Irina.
Yes, I am pessimistic and optimistic at the same time. Pessimistic meaning that, in my opinion, as far as the biggest tech company who today are governing the AI will remain close to power, especially far-right power, I'm a little bit pessimistic because we know that there are a huge probability that the information we're going to get is especially misinformation. And actually for that, I can give you a few numbers because I was reading an article saying that so false or misleading content spreads 6 times faster than accurate information on social platforms. And also during crisis moments like COVID, wars, misinformation volume increases by between 300 and 500%. And AI significantly accelerates production speed. So in my opinion, I'm a little bit pessimistic because we still today don't have a real governance of AI. Who is responsible for all the information we see online? Today, everything is managed based on a voluntary ethical guidelines. So maybe this will improve. There are different, in Europe, we already have the AI Act, in the US. But as far as there is no a real stable governance about how AI is managed, I'm staying pessimistic. And also with the fact that tech companies, they're more interested about profits than people. But at the same time, I'm optimistic because I believe in collective action, and I believe that people can do great things, but only if we act together. And when we'll have a real awareness about what is AI, how to use it, and also having this capacity to step back and see, the real information, the macro image, and saying, okay, I'm using AI. How am I going to handle it with my kid? How am I going to handle it in my work, and so on? So I believe in collective action at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Patricia.
Look, Richard, I think we can only be optimistic, even if just for setting an example, we need to be optimistic about the future. Otherwise, we just sit down, right? But I'm going to be, I'm going to say.
So basically, the message is cheer up, and that's an order.
Exactly. We cannot afford to be pessimistic and sit on that, right? So what I want to say. Maybe I am aware that this is a generalization, and this reason why I'm optimistic is very biased. But we work in Eurecat, which is a technology center. We have 800 people, and most of them largely are researchers and are scientists. And I am witnessing every day the generational change, the generations Z that is coming. They are made of a different pace. They come committed. They are impact driven. They do not have so many of the pressures and the things that we, millennials and up, come with. So I am so optimistic that they will find their ways. with these mission-driven kind of lives that they aim carrying out. And I think they will make a huge difference once, you know, a generational change, of course.
Mandy.
Before me first, wasn't you, Sharon? Okay. No, so for me, I think there's some really interesting points. It is about being kind of positive about like technology, and AI is here to stay. And I think that it is there, it can be done for amazing things. There's a lot of things that are really positive about it. And I think, you know, it's here to stay. So it's about us not being left behind. And actually, it's about leveling up that playing field. And actually, I think it's about making people take responsibility for themselves as well, because actually, I always say to people, if you wouldn't do it in person, you wouldn't go out and share your data, your personal bank details, and give away your mum's password or whatever. Why would you do it online? So I think it is about some common sense that needs to be taught again. And again, I think, you know, we're at a place in the world right now that things are just happening so much that we don't know what is real, like the myths and the disinformation, but it's our responsibility as individuals. So I think before we start going after all the big tech companies and governments and everybody else, I think it is about ourselves, looking at our own families, keeping our children safe, looking at, you know, our communities, and then looking at that whole conversation, because they all just are really interlinked and that. So that was just my point. And thank you again, a great conversation.
No, and thank you very much for your fantastic contribution. Shiran, and then I'm going to give the last word to Basil because he's the one who woke up so early. Shiran first.
Thank you. So I think also I'm optimistic, and I think that the first step is the understanding that we have a problem. And I think that we are in the stage as well. So I think it's very positive first step. It will take time, right? And also we need to define exactly the problem and then bring together the relevant sector to address it. And what we are doing in this is our new approach, is how we can reuse the technology as part of the solution, how we can use it in very proactive way, if it's in the silence of science, if it's fighting the myths and disinformation, if it's to increase empathy and emotion. And I think this is what we are bringing to the table, the new approach, how we all as a society can use in the technology in proactive way to address those issues. So thank you again for this great discussion and great platform.
Thank you to you, Shiran, for being with us. It's been great to hear you. Basil, my friend, I hope the sun has already risen in Texas.
It is. You can already tell the lighting is much better now.
Very good.
And I think having the last comment, I can't afford but to be optimistic, and I'd like to end with the same optimism I started with. And reflecting on this, I don't think AI is objectively good or bad. It's how we use it. And I think at the core of that is our value systems and ethics that come along with all of the technical expertise and the scientific expertise and the research expertise that we're talking about. So I think at the core of ensuring that we're using AI in a positive way and we're making use of it in a way that benefits society in a positive way is a good grounding of foundational values and ethics and very good soft skills that accompany the technical and AI related skills that we often overemphasize over these soft skills that are very critical.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I just want to say we've got 2 minutes. I apologize to anyone in the audience who has asked the question. We've unfortunately run out of time. I wish this could have gone on for a lot longer. Basil doesn't, but I wish this could have gone on for a lot longer. I just want to thank you again. So I want to thank very much Mandy for joining us from the UK. I presume you're in the UK at the moment, Mandy, but thank you very much for joining us. It's been an honor to hear you talk. I want to thank you, Shiran. You have certainly made us think, and I certainly want to learn a lot more about hearing their voices, which sounds absolutely fascinating. And that's a conversation that we have pending. Patricia, I'm probably going to say thank you to you again when we meet in the corridor in about 2 minutes' time, but I want to say thank you too publicly as well, okay, because you're a fantastic colleague and you're somebody who I enjoy working with so much, but especially listening to your opinion. Sabrina, a pleasure as always to be able to hear you and for your valuable input. Klaus, it's been an honor to hear you. You are a real expert in what we've been discussing today. And again, I look forward to working together with you. And IRINA, of course, IRINA is part of the Cassandra coordination team, and she's very much responsible for developing what we hope will be our grain of sand towards creating, shall we say, a better humanity able to make the most of the technology which is at our disposition. Thank you very much to all of you. It has been a real pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future very soon, both individually and together. And thank you to the audience for listening to this session. The next session, for those of you in the audience who want to know, is at 4 o'clock Central European time, and it will be on the expansion of Cassandra beyond Africa and the Mediterranean into India, North, Central, and South America. So thank you very much indeed, and have a really great afternoon, or in the case of Basil, have a really great day and go to bed early tonight.